On the morning everything shattered, the house felt strangely silent, as if it already sensed the storm about to break. Olivia, 7 months pregnant, moved slowly down the staircase, one hand on the rail, the other resting on her belly, whispering to her baby that brighter days were coming. She didn't know those words would be tested within minutes. Chloe Merrick, Brandon's mistress, stood at the bottom of the stairs with a smirk that didn't match the calm of the sunlit foyer. She held a mug of coffee as though she lived there, as though she owned everything Olivia still believed she had a right to. Chloe stepped closer, whispering that Brandon wanted Olivia out of the house before the weekend. Olivia's heart sank, but she tried to steady her breath. She told Chloe she wasn't leaving, not in her condition, not when she had nowhere else to go. Chloe's eyes narrowed with a coldness Olivia had never seen. In one swift movement, Chloe reached for Olivia's wrist and shoved her backward. The world spun. Olivia remembered the scream leaving her throat, the violent jolt in her abdomen, the thundering crack when her arms struck the edge of a step. Pain exploded through her body. She rolled until she hit the landing, gasping, terrified. The baby had stopped moving. Her iPhone slid across the hardwood, the screen shattering. The sound felt like an omen. As Olivia tried to push herself up with her good hand, she saw Brandon appear at the top of the stairs. For a moment, a fragile hope flickered. Maybe he would finally step in, finally protect her, finally act like the husband he once pretended to be. But Brandon looked at her with utter disgust. "Get up," he said. "You brought this on yourself." Olivia stared at him, unable to understand how a man she once trusted could watch her bleed and break without blinking. She whispered that Chloe had pushed her, that she needed help, that something felt wrong with the baby. Brandon shrugged. He told her to stop being dramatic, then turned away to answer a call, his voice instantly softening when he realized it was Chloe's. The pain in Olivia's arm was unbearable, but the fear for her unborn child drowned everything else. She tried to move, tried to call for help, but her voice came out broken, barely audible. She pressed her hand against her belly, praying for a kick, any small sign her baby was still safe inside her. Her vision blurred, and the walls seemed to sway as footsteps echoed distantly, hinting that the house was not as empty as she feared. Somewhere behind a partially closed door, something shifted, a presence she could not name yet. Olivia forced herself to breathe, sensing that what happened on those stairs was only the beginning of something far darker than she understood. But she had no idea that someone had already witnessed more than she realized. Olivia couldn't tell how long she lay on the landing before sound returned to her ears, a slow, muffled throb like an echo trapped behind glass. She blinked, trying to keep her vision from dimming as pain radiated up her fractured arm. The baby still wasn't moving. Panic clawed its way through her chest. She reached for her shattered phone, but the cracked screen refused to wake. She tried to call out again, yet her voice barely carried. Her pulse thudded unevenly, and the edges of the hallway shimmered. She felt herself fading when footsteps rushed toward her from the foyer, followed by a sharp gasp. It wasn't Brandon. It was Mrs. Langley, the elderly neighbor who checked in occasionally. She had come by to drop off a small box of baby clothes she'd knitted. When she saw Olivia crumpled on the floor, she knelt beside her, trembling as she dialed 911. Olivia felt the woman's hands pressing gently against her shoulder, urging her to stay conscious. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, growing louder by the second. Olivia whispered that the baby wasn't moving. "Mrs. Langley squeezed her hand and told her to hold on. Within moments, paramedics burst through the door, lifting Olivia carefully onto a stretcher. The ambulance rattled down the street, red lights flickering across Olivia's tear-streaked face. One paramedic pressed a Doppler monitor against her belly, searching urgently. A faint heartbeat finally echoed through the small cabin, and Olivia exhaled in relief. But the medic frowned, noting the stress indicators. They needed to get her to the hospital quickly. Olivia clutched the blanket covering her, fighting the fear that kept rising like a wave. She asked if her baby would be okay. The medic avoided promises, telling her they were doing everything they could. The city blurred past the ambulance windows as they rushed toward the ER entrance. Inside Mount Sinai, bright lights burned overhead as nurses swarmed around her. A doctor with gentle eyes asked how she fell. Olivia hesitated, glancing at the doorway as though Brandon might appear and silence her. She whispered the truth anyway. The doctor's expression hardened. They recorded every detail, took photographs, and ran tests while Olivia lay trembling. Her broken arm needed to be set, and her baby needed monitoring for the next several hours. A nurse brushed Olivia's hair from her face and told her she wasn't alone now. Olivia felt her throat tighten. For the first time, someone believed her. When Brandon finally arrived, he didn't rush toward her. He walked in complaining about traffic, acting annoyed rather than concerned. Chloe hovered behind him, pretending to be worried. Brandon claimed Olivia must have slipped and injured herself. The doctor straightened, unimpressed, informing him that Olivia's injuries didn't match a simple fall. Brandon's jaw tensed, but he forced a shrug. Olivia looked away, unable to bear the coldness in his eyes. She felt her baby shift slightly, as though sensing her distress. A small movement, but enough to steady her for a moment. The officers arrived minutes later. They asked to speak privately with Olivia, and Brandon protested loudly until one officer shut him down. Olivia recounted everything again, this time more confidently. The officers exchanged looks, realizing her story aligned with the injuries. Something dark flickered in Brandon's expression. The first hint that he understood this was spiraling beyond his control. Olivia watched him, a fragile spark of strength rising inside her. The hospital lights felt harsh, but they revealed the truth in ways her home never had. And someone else had already taken an interest in her case and wasn't planning to step aside. Morning light spilled across the hospital room when Olivia woke to the soft beeping of monitors and the dull ache radiating from her newly casted arm. She blinked slowly, trying to remember where she was, and the memory of the stairway crash snapped back with brutal clarity. The baby had kicked a few times during the night, reassuring her, but fear still curled tight in her stomach. A nurse entered, smiling gently, checking her vitals, before telling her the obstetric team wanted another round of monitoring. Olivia nodded, thankful for any sign her child was safe. Moments later, Brandon barged into the room, the door banging against the wall. He wasn't carrying flowers or even concern. Instead, he held a stack of hospital papers and an expression sharpened with irritation. "You really know how to cause problems," he muttered as he dropped the forms onto the tray table. "They're asking for your version of the incident again. I already told them it was an accident. Don't complicate things." Olivia felt her throat tighten. "Brandon, she pushed me. You saw." He cut her off immediately. "I saw you lose your balance. If you start lying about my relationship with Chloe, you'll regret it." His tone slid into something quieter, more dangerous. "You don't want people questioning your mental stability while you're pregnant, do you?" The words hit her harder than the fall. He wasn't just denying the truth, he was preparing to twist it until she looked unhinged. He paced near the end of the bed, rehearsing a narrative so polished it suggested he had planned it long before the accident. He insisted she had been emotional for weeks, that she tripped because she was overwhelmed. He claimed she'd been forgetful, even paranoid. Olivia stared at him, stunned at how easily he shaped cruelty into a weapon. A doctor entered, interrupting the tension. She asked Brandon to step outside so she could speak privately with Olivia. He resisted until the doctor's stern expression left no room for argument. Once alone, the doctor lowered her voice, explaining that there were inconsistencies in the story Brandon submitted. They also noted fading bruises along Olivia's ribs, patterns consistent with past force. Olivia's face warmed with shame. She hadn't wanted anyone to know about the moments Brandon shoved her during arguments, the times he grabbed her wrists hard enough to leave marks. She whispered that she just wanted peace until the baby arrived. The doctor nodded empathetically and said the hospital's social worker and a police detective were reviewing her case. They wanted to ensure she had a safe environment to return to. Olivia hesitated, fear churned inside her. Returning to Brandon felt like stepping back into a burning building. Yet she had no savings, no family, and no clear place to go. She swallowed hard, trying to hide the tremble in her voice as she asked what would happen if she refused to go home. Before the doctor could answer, the door reopened and in walked Detective Mason Reed. He gave Olivia a steady, straightforward look, one that held no judgment, only purpose. He introduced himself softly, explaining he'd been assigned to investigate the incident. Olivia's heart beat faster, unsure whether to fear this new attention or welcome it. Mason sat beside her, pulling out a small notebook. His first question was simple but carried weight. "Olivia, are you safe with your husband?" Her breath caught, No one had ever asked her that so directly. And for the first time, she wasn't sure how to answer without changing everything. Olivia was discharged late in the afternoon, her arm heavy in its cast and her nerves tangled in dread. Detective Mason had offered to arrange safe housing for the night, but Olivia refused, afraid of escalating Brandon's anger before she had time to think. She told herself she just needed to gather her belongings and leave quietly if things worsened. A nurse helped her into a wheelchair, whispering that she deserved better than the fear she carried. Those words clung to her like a fragile shield as she stepped into the cool air outside the hospital. Brandon's SUV pulled up to the curb with a jolt, music blasting through the speakers. He didn't get out to help her. He simply tapped the horn twice, irritated. Olivia climbed in slowly, careful not to jar her belly. The moment she shut the door, Brandon snapped that the hospital had embarrassed him by asking too many questions. He warned her to remember the story if anyone else asked. Olivia stared at the passing streets, listening to the city hum, while her own world felt painfully small. When they reached the house, Chloe's car was already parked in the driveway. Olivia's stomach tightened. Brandon unlocked the door and strode inside without a word. Olivia followed, heart heavy, stepping into a home that felt colder than the hospital's fluorescent lights. Chloe lounged on the sofa, flipping through a glossy magazine as if she owned the place. She looked up with a smirk, pretending surprise. "Oh, you're back. Thought they'd keep you longer," she said. Brandon chuckled. Olivia walked past them, determined not to crumble. She headed toward the staircase, needing to sit down in her room, but Chloe blocked her path with deliberate slowness. "Careful," she whispered. "Wouldn't want another accident." Brandon shot her a warning glance, but not out of sympathy. He feared Olivia might repeat the accusation. Olivia retreated to the small guest room Brandon had forced her into weeks earlier. The space smelled of dust and unused air. She sat on the edge of the mattress, breathing shakily. Her phone vibrated. A text from Detective Mason appeared. "Just checking. Are you safe tonight?" She hesitated before replying. "I think so." She didn't believe it, but she didn't know how to explain the quiet terror lingering in every corner of the house. Downstairs, voices rose. Chloe complained that Olivia's presence ruined everything. Brandon muttered that the police were watching them, and they needed to be careful. Olivia pressed her ear to the door, hearing Chloe insist that Olivia should be sent to stay somewhere else. Brandon agreed, saying she was becoming a liability. Tears burned Olivia's eyes, but anger began pushing through the fear. She looked around the room, searching for documents, ultrasound photos, anything she needed to protect before they forced her out. While checking a drawer, she found something unexpected. A small audio recorder she had forgotten she owned. She clicked play. Her own voice filled the room, recorded months earlier when she practiced reading stories to her unborn child. The gentle sound strengthened her resolve. Her pulse quickened as dread settled heavily across her chest, warning her that whatever he planned was darker than anything she had faced before in her fragile life ever. Steps approached the hallway. Chloe's laughter rang out, too sharp to be harmless. Olivia gripped the recorder, knowing she needed evidence, protection, a plan, something. And then she heard Brandon say something that made her breath stop cold. "Tomorrow, we finish this." "I don't care how." Olivia barely slept. Every time she drifted off, she heard Brandon's voice repeating that chilling sentence. "Tomorrow, we finish this." "I don't care how." She lay curled around her belly, her casted arm throbbing, frightened of what "finish this" meant. By sunrise, she forced herself out of bed, needing to breathe air that didn't taste like fear. She walked into the kitchen slowly, hoping Brandon and Chloe were still asleep. Instead, she found them seated at the table, sharing breakfast as if they were the rightful couple of the house. Chloe looked up, smirking. "Morning, sunshine. Be careful walking. You know how clumsy you are." Brandon didn't laugh, but his cold stare said enough. Olivia reached for a glass of water, wishing she could disappear into the floor. Brandon announced they had a company event that afternoon, and she was expected to attend despite her injury. She asked why. He said she needed to prove she was stable, adding that rumors were spreading since the hospital contacted him again. Olivia felt a wave of humiliation crash over her. By mid-afternoon, he drove her to a sleek office building where his company's networking gathering was being held. The event space overlooked the river, filled with polished executives, expensive cologne, and carefully rehearsed smiles. Olivia walked slowly, her cast heavy, her steps unsteady. Brandon introduced her to colleagues without warmth. Chloe stayed close, whispering insults whenever nobody was listening. Olivia tried to focus on breathing steadily, afraid stress would harm the baby. During a lull, Brandon pulled her aside. "Do not mention the stairs," he warned. "If you embarrass me here, you'll regret it." Olivia swallowed hard. A director approached, noticing Olivia's cast. He asked kindly what happened. Before she could speak, Brandon answered for her, claiming she slipped because she was distracted and emotional. The director glanced at Olivia sympathetically, clearly unconvinced. Chloe stepped in with a fake laugh, insisting pregnancy had made Olivia forgetful. Their words pierced deeper than any bruise. Olivia felt eyes turning toward her, pitying or judging. She excused herself and went to the restroom, locking the door before her tears fell. She stared at her reflection, pale, exhausted, frightened. For a moment, she wondered if she truly had no strength left. But then she remembered the soft heartbeat she'd heard in the ambulance, the tiny life inside her still fighting. Olivia wiped her cheeks. She couldn't break here. When she returned to the event space, she noticed two men speaking quietly with Brandon, their expressions tense. Brandon's jaw was tight, his shoulders rigid. Something had disrupted his perfect facade. Olivia watched him step aside, answering a phone call. She saw his face pale slightly, his tone dropping to a frantic whisper. Chloe followed him, demanding to know what was happening. He shoved her hand away, not caring who saw. Olivia recognized fear when she saw it, and this was the first time she'd ever seen fear in him. Moments later, Brandon returned, trying to mask his nerves. He told Olivia they were leaving immediately. She followed him to the parking lot, uneasy. Chloe hurried after them, insisting she had a right to know what was going on. Brandon snapped at her to be quiet. Olivia sensed something shifting, something bigger than their cruelty, something they couldn't control. As Brandon unlocked the SUV, his phone buzzed again. He looked at the screen, and his face drained completely. Whatever he had been hiding was finally starting to surface. Olivia sat in the passenger seat, clutching her seatbelt with her good hand, while Brandon sped through the parking lot, muttering curses under his breath. She felt each bump in the road echo through her ribs, reminding her how fragile everything inside her had become. Brandon's phone buzzed again, vibrating angrily against the console. He ignored it at first, but when it rang a second time, longer and sharper, he swore and answered. Olivia listened as his voice shifted from irritation to panic. Someone on the other end was demanding something he clearly couldn't provide. Chloe, sitting in the back seat, leaned forward with suspicion carved across her face. She demanded to know who was calling, but Brandon snapped at her, telling her to stay out of it. Olivia watched their exchange, sensing cracks spreading through their partnership like fractures beneath thin ice. When they reached the house, Brandon ordered both women inside. Olivia hesitated, feeling the weight of dread in her chest, but she followed. The moment the door shut, Brandon rounded on Chloe, accusing her of failing to keep certain documents hidden. Chloe fired back, insisting everything was under control. Olivia slowly backed toward the hallway, hoping to slip away to her room, but Brandon stopped her. His glare froze her in place. He demanded to know what she had told the doctors and police. Olivia whispered that she only told the truth. That word sent Brandon spiraling into fury. He slammed his hand against the wall, inches from her face, yelling that she was trying to destroy him. Chloe watched with growing irritation, not sympathy, as though Olivia's suffering inconvenienced her. Olivia braced herself, knowing he wanted control more than anything, and she was slipping from his grip. When his phone buzzed a third time, he finally answered again. Olivia caught fragments, words like investigation, assets, and deadline. Brandon's face drained of color. Chloe stepped closer, demanding the truth, but he pushed her away. Olivia felt fear coil in her stomach, sensing something much bigger than jealousy unfolding. He suddenly announced he was leaving for a while, and that neither of them should contact anyone. Without another word, he stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. Chloe cursed under her breath, furious at being excluded. Olivia retreated to her room, shaken but strangely alert. As she sat on the edge of the bed, she replayed the conversation in her mind. Investigation, assets, deadline. Something financial was collapsing around Brandon, and he was desperate. Olivia realized that whatever trouble he faced could turn dangerous for her and the baby. She needed to protect herself. She reached for the small recorder she had found earlier and tested it again. Hearing her own voice soothed her slightly. She decided she would start documenting everything from this moment on. If Brandon planned something cruel, she would not stand defenseless. She would gather truth to survive. A sudden thump downstairs startled her. She strained to listen. Quiet. Then another noise, something falling. Olivia stood slowly, heart pounding. She stepped into the hallway, gripping the recorder tightly. Chloe's voice echoed from below, tense and angry, arguing with someone Olivia couldn't identify. Someone else was in the house. She peeked over the railing and saw shadows shifting near the living room. Chloe sounded frightened, her voice higher than usual. Olivia's breath caught when she realized Chloe wasn't arguing with Brandon. His SUV was gone. Whoever stood below was a stranger, and the tension pulsing through the house felt dangerous. Olivia stepped back quietly, realizing danger was closing in faster than she imagined now. Olivia froze at the top of the stairs, her breath trapped in her throat as Chloe argued with the unknown man below. His voice was low, sharp, and carried the unmistakable tone of someone used to being obeyed. Olivia couldn't make out every word, but she heard enough to understand that whatever trouble Brandon was in, it was no longer confined to whispered threats over the phone. It had arrived in their living room. Chloe's voice cracked as she insisted she had no involvement, that Brandon had promised everything would be handled. The man cut her off, demanding the location of documents Brandon was supposed to deliver. Olivia felt her stomach twist. Documents. That matched the words she heard earlier. She stepped back, careful not to creak the floor. Her hand instinctively shielded her belly as she listened. The man barked that time was up, and Brandon's delays were no longer tolerable. Chloe scrambled for excuses, her bravado evaporating. A heavy silence followed before something crashed against the wall, making Olivia flinch. The man's tone shifted, colder, threatening consequences if Brandon didn't appear soon. Olivia couldn't see his face, but the chill in his voice made her pulse quicken. Suddenly, footsteps pounded up the stairs. Olivia hurried into her room, closing the door gently before pressing her ear against the wood. Chloe was crying now, pleading. Olivia sank onto the bed, realizing she was living alongside people whose lives were unraveling in ways she never imagined. Fear seeped into her bones, but so did a strange clarity. She was no longer just dealing with cruelty or betrayal. Something criminal pulsed beneath the surface. She looked around the room, searching for anything she needed to protect before things spiraled further. She found her prenatal files, her small stash of emergency cash, and the recorder she had begun using. She tucked them into her bag, adding a sweater and the tiny knitted baby hat Mrs. Langley had brought. Every move felt urgent now. Then her phone vibrated with a message from Detective Mason. "Are you still safe? Please respond." Olivia hesitated. She couldn't explain everything through a message, but she typed, "Something's happening here." Mason replied instantly, "Do not leave the house. Do not confront anyone. I'm nearby." A sudden pounding at her bedroom door made Olivia jump. Chloe demanded to come in. Her voice was shaky, layered with fear. Olivia cracked the door open, and Chloe slipped inside, locking it behind her. For the first time, the mistress looked genuinely terrified. She whispered that the man downstairs wasn't someone to cross, that Brandon had gotten involved in something dangerous involving missing money. Olivia stared at her, stunned not by the confession, but by the realization that Chloe was finally afraid too. Chloe paced the room, pulling at her hair, insisting she didn't know the details. She begged Olivia to help her call Brandon, as though Olivia had any influence left. Olivia refused, clutching her casted arm as pain throbbed through it. Chloe's panic intensified. She whispered that if the man returned without what he wanted, they could all be in danger. Olivia's pulse raced. She wanted to protect her baby, not Chloe, yet she couldn't ignore the looming threat. Downstairs, the front door slammed. Chloe gasped. Olivia's heart seized. Someone had left or someone new had arrived. Olivia moved toward the window, pulling aside the curtain, her breath fogging the glass. A black sedan sat idling at the curb, headlights slicing through the dusk. And then she saw who stepped out. It wasn't Brandon, it was someone she never expected to see again. Olivia stared through the window, her breath turning shallow as Detective Mason Reed stepped out of the black sedan. His presence felt like a lifeline thrown into deep water, and yet she sensed danger simmering beneath the surface. Chloe moved beside her, panic tightening her voice. "Why is a cop here? Did you call him?" Olivia shook her head, unsure whether to feel relieved or afraid. Mason scanned the house, noting the cracked blinds and the tension humming inside. Before either woman could decide what to do, a violent knock shook the front door. Chloe flinched. Olivia stepped back, clutching her belly. Mason called out from the porch, demanding entry. His tone was firm, not hostile, but urgent. A moment later, Olivia heard the lock click from the inside. Chloe must have hurried downstairs while Olivia froze, debating whether she could trust him fully. When the door swung open, Mason stepped in swiftly, eyes sharp, assessing everything. "What's going on here?" he asked, voice low but controlled. Chloe immediately launched into frantic excuses, claiming nothing was wrong, insisting the house was safe. Mason ignored her and turned to Olivia, who had made her way to the top of the stairs. His gaze softened, seeing her pale face and trembling hands. "You texted. Something was happening. Tell me." Olivia descended the stairs slowly, gripping the railing to balance her weight. She explained about the unknown man, his threats, and Brandon's mysterious documents. Chloe interrupted repeatedly, twisting the story to protect herself, but Mason shut her down with a stern glare. His attention remained on Olivia, whose voice trembled yet carried a newfound determination. She described the fear curling in every corner of the house, the way Brandon's behavior had spiraled beyond control. As she finished, the sound of an engine approached. Mason's stance shifted instantly, protective and alert. He moved toward the window, peeking between the blinds. "Someone's coming," he murmured. Chloe's breath hitched. Olivia felt her heart pound, echoing through her ribs. A dark blue SUV slowed near the driveway. For a terrifying second, she expected the dangerous man to return. Instead, Brandon stepped out, slamming the car door with a fury that sent a cold ache through Olivia's spine. Mason motioned for both women to stay behind him. Brandon stormed into the house, stopping dead when he saw the detective. His surprise hardened into hostility. "Why are you here?" he demanded. Mason met his glare without flinching. "We need to discuss a few inconsistencies in your statements and the fact that someone dangerous was seen entering this home." Brandon denied everything, his voice rising. He accused Olivia of lying, of wanting to ruin him. Mason stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Then explain the call you received earlier, the one that left you shaking." Brandon froze for half a second, revealing more than he meant to. Olivia watched realization dawn on Mason's face. Something criminal wasn't just possible, it was likely. Chloe stepped forward, desperate. "Brandon, tell him what's happening before it gets worse." Brandon ordered her to shut up, but her fear outweighed her loyalty. She confessed that someone had been demanding money Brandon had promised to deliver. Mason's jaw tightened. Olivia reached for the recorder hidden in her pocket, feeling its weight like steady reassurance. She'd captured voices, threats, hints of truth. She didn't know how much it would matter yet, but she sensed a shift beginning. Brandon turned toward her, eyes blazing with betrayal and fury. Olivia met his stare, standing straighter despite her fear. And Mason noticed something, then something that made his expression change. Because for the first time, Olivia didn't look breakable at all. The tension inside the house thickened like storm air before lightning. Olivia stood near the bottom of the stairs, clutching her injured arm, steadying her breath as Brandon's glare sliced toward her. Mason positioned himself slightly ahead, a barrier she never expected to have. Chloe hovered near the kitchen doorway, torn between fear and the instinct to protect herself. Every corner of the room vibrated with unspoken threats. Brandon stepped forward, jaw clenched. "You invited a detective into our home?" His voice dropped into a low warning. Olivia didn't answer. Mason did. "I'm here because your wife reported danger. And I arrived to find a stranger threatening people inside this house." Brandon scoffed, but the flicker in his eyes betrayed worry. Mason continued, describing the SUV that had visited earlier and the missing documents. Brandon tried to laugh it off, but his voice cracked in the middle. Olivia swallowed hard. For the first time, she saw fear in him. Real fear. Not the theatrical anger he used to control her, but genuine panic. Mason noticed too. He shifted his stance, studying Brandon carefully. I need you to explain what you're involved in, he said, and why someone came here making threats. Brandon's temper flared. None of this concerns my wife. She's confused, emotional, and injured. His eyes darted toward Olivia, simmering with warning. She needs rest, not police. Olivia felt the familiar urge to shrink, but Mason's steady presence beside her kept her upright. Then Chloe spoke, voice trembling. Brandon, stop. He's going to find out anyway. Brandon snapped at her to be quiet, but she didn't. She stepped closer, words tumbling out. She revealed that Brandon had taken money from a developer promising returns he never delivered, that the man who entered the house earlier wasn't random. He was sent to collect what Brandon owed. Olivia's heartbeat thundered. This wasn't just infidelity or cruelty. This was crime. Mason turned sharply toward Brandon. Is that true? Brandon's face twisted. He denied everything, but the cracks in his voice betrayed him. Mason then asked Olivia if she had any evidence of threats or dangerous behavior. This was the moment she feared and prepared for. Her hand slipped into her pocket, pulling out the small recorder. Brandon's expression collapsed into fury. Don't you dare, he spat. But Olivia pressed play. The room filled with Chloe's whispers, the stranger's threats, Brandon's earlier statements, every hidden truth now echoing in the open. Chloe gasped, realizing she'd been recorded. Brandon lunged toward Olivia, rage erupting, but Mason caught him, shoving him back with controlled strength. Enough, Mason ordered. You just confirmed everything. Olivia's breath shook. She felt faint, but the baby shifted gently, grounding her. Chloe backed away, chest heaving, muttering that she hadn't agreed to any of this. Brandon swore he'd destroy Olivia for betraying him. Mason warned him that threatening her in front of a detective was a terrible mistake. Outside, thunder rumbled, signaling the storm finally arriving. Mason insisted Olivia pack a small bag. You're not staying here tonight, he said. She hesitated, fear tugging at her, but something braver tugged harder. She nodded. Chloe sank onto a chair, shaking. Brandon stood rigid, unable to mask the unraveling of everything he'd tried to control. As Olivia climbed the stairs to gather her things, lightning flashed behind her, illuminating the hallway. She wasn't running in fear now. She was walking toward the first sliver of safety she'd known in years. Olivia's hands trembled as she packed a small overnight bag in the dim light of the bedroom. The storm outside crackled against the windows, each roll of thunder blending with her pounding heartbeat. Mason waited downstairs, insisting she take only essentials. Every item she touched carried memories of pain or hope. She folded a maternity dress, tucked in her prenatal files, and slid the tiny knitted hat from Mrs. Langley between the clothes. It felt like packing the last pieces of a life slipping through her fingers. As she zipped the bag, she heard Brandon shouting downstairs, followed by Mason's firm commands. Chloe added shrill arguments, her panic spiraling. Olivia paused at the top of the stairs, gripping the railing. She felt dizzy, her baby kicking lightly as if urging her to keep going. Step by step, she descended, expecting chaos but finding an eerie stillness instead. Mason stood in the center of the room, calm but alert. Brandon leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Chloe sat with her head in her hands. We're leaving, Mason said gently, guiding Olivia toward the door. But Brandon pushed away from the wall, his voice slicing through the quiet. She's not going anywhere. She's my wife. Olivia froze. The old instinct to obey flickered inside her, but Mason stepped between them. Your control ends now. She doesn't feel safe here. Brandon lunged forward, face twisted with desperation. She's lying. She wants to ruin me. Mason didn't budge. Your actions are ruining you, not her. Something inside Brandon snapped. He grabbed a vase from the table and hurled it across the room. Glass shattered near Olivia's feet. She gasped, clutching her stomach. Mason moved instantly, forcing Brandon back with a sharp arm across his chest. Chloe screamed, begging Brandon to stop. The moment spiraled into something wild, raw, and irreversible. Then, headlights blazed across the living room windows. A car screeched into the driveway. Olivia's breath caught. Mason reached for his radio, but before he could speak, the front door swung open. Officer Dawson, Mason's partner, stepped in with urgency. We just got confirmation, he said. The man who came earlier is connected to a major laundering case. Brandon's name is on the list. Brandon's face drained. The truth had finally reached him. Mason turned to Olivia. You need to leave now. She nodded, legs shaking as he guided her outside. Rain soaked her hair instantly, the cold air stinging her cheeks. Chloe stumbled onto the porch, shouting at Brandon to fix things, but officers blocked her path. Dawson began reading Brandon his rights, each word landing like a hammer. Brandon fought, claiming setup, but there was no room left for lies. As Mason helped Olivia into the back of his car, pain tightened across her abdomen. She winced, pressing a hand to her side. Mason noticed immediately. Are you contracting? She shook her head, though uncertainty clouded her eyes. Probably stress, she whispered. He turned the heater on low, speaking softly. We'll get you somewhere safe. You're okay. Inside the house, Chloe's frantic cries echoed through the storm. Officers escorted her to the curb for questioning. Olivia watched the scene through blurred eyes. Realizing she wasn't just escaping danger, she was watching the collapse of the world that had trapped her. Mason climbed into the driver's seat, steady and calm. You're not alone anymore, he said gently. For the first time in a long time, Olivia believed him. And that belief was the one thing Brandon could never take back. Olivia sat in the back of Mason's car while rain hammered the windshield, blurring the world outside into streaks of trembling light. Her body felt heavy, drained from fear and adrenaline, yet an unfamiliar sense of relief settled slowly in her chest. Brandon was finally restrained, shouting as officers led him away. The storm no longer sounded threatening. It sounded like something washing the darkness off her life. Still, her hand rested anxiously on her belly, monitoring every movement. The baby kicked twice, gentle but insistent, grounding her. Mason glanced at her through the rearview mirror. We're heading to a safe shelter for tonight, he said. They'll have medical staff and a private room. You'll be protected. His voice had softened since the moment he entered the house, no longer just professional. It carried genuine concern, the kind that made Olivia feel seen instead of judged. She nodded, though her throat tightened with unspoken emotions. No one had protected her in years. Learning to accept it felt strange. The city lights shimmered on the wet pavement as they drove. Olivia leaned her head back, exhaustion pulling at her eyelids. But every time she drifted near sleep, a flash of Chloe's terrified face or the sound of Brandon's rage jolted her awake. She whispered, "Do you think he'll get out tonight?" Mason shook his head. Not with what we know now. Financial crimes, intimidation, possible domestic abuse, there's enough to hold him. And enough to keep you far away from him. She exhaled shakily, realizing she had been holding her breath for too long. When they arrived at the shelter, a nurse met them at the door. Warmth flooded Olivia's cold skin as she stepped inside. The nurse guided her to a quiet room with soft lighting and a narrow bed. Mason stayed near the doorway, giving her space but not disappearing. The nurse checked her blood pressure, listened to the baby's heartbeat, and assured her the stress hadn't caused early labor. Relief swept through Olivia so intensely she nearly cried. After the nurse left, Mason approached the edge of the bed. "You did the hardest part tonight," he said. "You chose to walk away." Olivia looked up at him, overwhelmed. "I didn't feel brave," she whispered. "I just felt like I couldn't breathe in that house anymore." Mason shook his head gently. "Bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's moving anyway." His words landed deep, touching old wounds she never voiced. She didn't know how to respond, so she simply nodded, letting silence settle comfortably between them. As the storm eased outside, a staff member brought Olivia a warm meal. She hadn't eaten since morning, and though her appetite wavered, she forced herself to take small bites. Mason called his partner, updating Dawson on Olivia's condition. She listened quietly as he emphasized her safety, not realizing how firmly he was stepping into that role. When he ended the call, she thanked him softly. He gave a small smile. "Rest tonight. Tomorrow we start building a case strong enough that you'll never have to look over your shoulder again." She crawled into bed, pulling the blanket over her legs. Her arm ached, but her heart felt strangely lighter. Mason turned off the overhead light, leaving only the glow of a small lamp. As he moved toward the door, she found herself asking, "Will you check in tomorrow?" He paused, then nodded. "I will." Olivia closed her eyes. And for the first time in years, she slept without fear tonight. Morning filtered softly through the shelter's curtains as Olivia awoke, her body heavy but her mind clearer than it had been in months. The The faint hum of voices outside her door reminded her she was no longer trapped in the house that bruised her spirit. She sat up slowly, her casted arm throbbing, but the ache felt distant compared to the weight she'd carried before. The baby's gentle movement reassured her. For once, she didn't feel the need to jump at every sound. A soft knock came before the door opened slightly. Mason stepped in, holding 2 cups of warm tea. His presence filled the room with something steady, something safe. "You slept?" he asked. She nodded, a small smile lifting her lips. He handed her the tea, then sat in the chair beside her bed. "There's progress," he began. "Brandon is still in custody. And the man who came to your house last night, he's connected to more incidents than we expected." Olivia's breath caught. "Will he come back?" she whispered. Mason shook his head. "Not here. We've put your location under protective status. Only authorized staff know where you are." Relief loosened the tightness in her spine. For the first time, she felt like she wasn't running alone. He opened a folder, revealing printed transcripts, notes, and photos. "We'll need your statement today, and any evidence you still have." Olivia reached into her bag, pulling out the recorder. Mason's face shifted as he accepted it, respect mingled with concern. "This may be more valuable than you realize," he said. "You were smarter than you give yourself credit for." Just as she exhaled, a knock sounded again. A shelter employee stepped in, her expression uneasy. "Detective Reed, someone is here asking about Miss Hayes." Olivia stiffened instantly. Panic rushed back, cold and sharp. "Who?" Mason demanded. "A woman," the employee answered. "She says her name is Chloe Merrick." Olivia felt the air leave her chest. Mason stood, jaw tightening. "She's not authorized. Keep her outside." Olivia shook her head. "Why would she come here?" Mason didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped into the hallway, leaving the door ajar. Olivia strained to listen. Chloe's voice was frantic, pleading to speak with Olivia. Mason shut her down firmly, but Chloe insisted she had information, something Olivia needed to hear before it was too late. The words made Olivia's skin prickle. After a tense exchange, Mason returned, closing the door behind him. "She's panicking," he said. "She claims Brandon made promises to people far more dangerous than we thought. She also says you're in more danger than he is." Olivia's heart raced. "Do you believe her?" Mason hesitated. "Chloe lies often, but fear like that isn't easy to fake." Before Olivia could respond, the shelter lights flickered. A brief outage swept the hallway, followed by the staff calling out in confusion. Olivia's pulse pounded. "Is something happening?" Mason moved quickly to the window, checking the street. When the power returned moments later, he turned to her. "Probably just weather damage," he said, though his tone was too controlled to be comforting. The nurse entered then, needing to run a quick fetal check. Olivia lay back as the monitor beeped steadily. Mason remained near, arms crossed, mind clearly racing. When the nurse left, he finally looked at Olivia. "I need you to tell me everything Brandon told you lately. Every strange conversation, every threat, every detail." Olivia swallowed hard, realizing the truth was no longer just about survival. It was becoming the key to something much bigger than she ever understood, and she was finally ready to speak the whole truth. Olivia sat upright as Mason positioned his notebook, ready to record every detail she could remember. Her palms felt damp, but for the first time, she sensed her voice mattered. She began with Brandon's late-night calls, the whispered arguments, the sudden cash withdrawals he tried to hide. She described nights when he'd pace the hallway, muttering about deadlines and people who didn't tolerate delays. Mason listened intently, asking gentle questions that helped her recall even the smallest clues. The picture forming in his notes grew darker by the minute. When she mentioned a locked drawer in Brandon's office, one she once saw him guarding angrily, Mason's attention sharpened. "Did you ever see what was inside?" he asked. Olivia shook her head. "No. But he always panicked when I walked near it. I thought it was just financial paperwork." Mason exhaled, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "It might be much more than that." Olivia felt a tremor of dread. Whatever Brandon had been hiding, it wasn't ordinary debt or marital secrets. A shelter worker interrupted, delivering a secure laptop Mason requested earlier. He opened a police database and began entering information. "Your recorder helped," he said, "but we need corroborating evidence. If that drawer contains records, transfers, anything illegal, it could connect him to larger crimes. Olivia felt her heartbeat quicken. She never imagined her escape would expose a criminal network. She simply wanted safety. Yet fate had pulled her deeper. Just then, her phone buzzed. It was a restricted number. Olivia froze. Mason took the phone gently and declined the call. "If it's important, they'll leave a message," he said. But Olivia sensed something chilling in her bones. Minutes later, a voicemail appeared. Mason played it on speaker. A distorted voice warned, "Tell your husband to deliver what he owes. If he can't, someone else will pay." Olivia covered her mouth as fear surged. Mason noted every word, jaw tight with controlled anger. "We need that drawer opened," he said. "Today." Olivia blinked. "But the house, Brandon," Mason reassured her. "The property is under police hold. He can't return. You won't be alone." The thought of stepping inside that house again made her stomach twist. Yet the idea of leaving the truth buried felt worse. She finally nodded. Before leaving, a nurse checked the baby. The calm rhythm on the monitor gave Olivia the courage she needed. Mason guided her through the shelter hallway toward the exit, his presence steady as a lighthouse in fog. They drove in silence, the city passing in muted colors. When they reached the house, police tape fluttered across the porch. 2 officers waited. The living room still felt heavy with the echoes of last night's chaos. Olivia followed Mason upstairs, stopping before Brandon's office door. Her breath hitched as memories rushed back, the shouting, the intimidation, the feeling of shrinking inside her own home. Mason used gloves and tools to open the locked drawer. It clicked. He pulled it open slowly. Inside lay stacks of envelopes, hard drives, and folders marked with dates, initials, and coded labels. Olivia's skin prickled. One folder contained photos of properties, money transfers, and signatures she recognized as Brandon's. Another held names she didn't know, but Mason did. His face hardened. "This isn't just fraud," he whispered. "This is organized financial crime." Olivia stepped back, heart pounding. She realized she had been living beside a man hiding dangerous secrets that could have destroyed her. And now, those secrets were no longer locked away, and neither was she anymore. She would never be powerless again. She would never be alone. The discovery of the hidden files left Olivia shaken, yet Mason sensed something still missing. He scanned the office again, pacing slowly, as if waiting for the room to reveal another secret. Olivia stood in the doorway, her hand braced against the frame, breathing through a wave of nausea. "There's something else," Mason murmured. This drawer wasn't the only thing he was guarding. He opened the cabinet beneath the desk and found a tangled mess of wires. A small blinking light caught his attention. "These are camera system backups," he said. Olivia's pulse fluttered. "But Brandon told me the cameras were broken." Mason's jaw clenched. "Broken to you, maybe, not to him." One of the officers brought over a tablet used to sync security feeds. With a few commands, Mason accessed the backup files. Several folders were corrupted, but one labeled Stairwell remained intact. Olivia felt her knees weaken. "Do you want to step outside?" Mason asked gently. She shook her head. She needed this. She deserved this truth. He pressed play. The footage flickered before sharpening into a painful, crystal-clear image. Olivia appeared at the top of the staircase, moving slowly, hand on the rail. Then Chloe stepped into frame. Her posture sharp, her smirk unmistakable. Olivia clasped her stomach as the next moments unfolded exactly as she remembered. Chloe advancing, grabbing her wrist, shoving her back. Olivia tumbling, hitting the steps, screaming as she fell. The recorder captured everything with undeniable clarity. But what stunned her most was not the fall. It was Brandon. He stood at the top of the stairs, watching, expression flat. He didn't move to help. He didn't shout. He simply observed, then turned away. Olivia covered her mouth, emotions crashing through her like waves breaking against rocks. Shame, grief, anger, heartbreak, all tangled into a single breathless ache. She had known he didn't love her, but seeing him choose not to save her, that pierced deeper than any injury. Mason paused the footage. His expression was gentler than she expected. "You didn't imagine any of it," he said softly. Olivia blinked hard, fighting tears. "I thought maybe I was exaggerating," she whispered. "I thought maybe I deserved it somehow." Mason shook his head firmly. "What happened to you wasn't your fault. He made choices, and now he'll face consequences. The officers exchanged glances, realizing they now had undeniable proof, the kind that courts, juries, and prosecutors relied on. One officer stepped aside to radio the station, confirming they'd found decisive evidence of assault. Olivia sank into the desk chair, trembling. "This is enough to protect you," Mason assured her. "More than enough." Just then, footsteps sounded downstairs. Olivia startled. Mason raised a hand, signaling her to stay still. An officer called up, "It's Dawson, we're clear." Olivia exhaled shakily. Dawson entered the office, soaked from rain. "We checked the entire perimeter," he said. "No sign of the man from last night, but his car was spotted 2 blocks away earlier. He's watching something." Olivia's breath hitched. "Watching me?" Mason didn't answer directly. "This evidence puts pressure on everyone involved, including whoever Brandon owes." Dawson placed gloves on the camera drive. "This goes straight to the district office." Before leaving, Mason crouched beside Olivia. "You're safer now than you've been in a long time. This footage changes everything." She nodded, though fear still lingered beneath her ribs. Mason helped her stand, guiding her through the dim hallway. As they exited the house, Olivia looked back one last time. The place that once held her hostage now contained the truth that could free her. And she realized the fall that almost ended her life might be the very thing that finally ends what she was never meant to endure. The drive back to the precinct was tense, the late afternoon sky draped in heavy gray clouds that pressed low over the city. Olivia sat in the back of Mason's car, her bag on her lap, one hand resting protectively on her belly. She kept replaying the footage in her mind, Chloe's shove, her own scream, and most hauntingly, Brandon's stillness at the top of the stairs. It felt surreal that the truth she doubted for so long now existed in undeniable clarity. The evidence that could finally free her was no longer trapped inside her memory. When they arrived, officers moved quickly, purposefully. Mason handed over the camera drive, the recorder, and the contents of the locked drawer to the lead investigator. Olivia watched through the glass panels as the room filled with detectives scanning files, discussing charges, and piecing together a timeline of crimes. Dawson approached Olivia with a reassuring nod. "You just tipped an entire investigation into motion," he said. She shook her head softly. "I didn't mean to expose everything. I just wanted safety." Dawson's voice gentled. "And you deserve it." Minutes later, the district attorney arrived, her expression sharpened with focus. She reviewed the footage silently, her jaw tightening. "Issue a warrant for both Brandon Wells and Chloe Merrick," she instructed. "Assault, obstruction, and suspected involvement in financial criminal activity." Hearing the words out loud made Olivia's skin prickle. Chloe, who had walked confidently through Olivia's home, mocking her pain, was now officially named a criminal suspect. An officer approached Mason. "Transport is ready," he said. "We'll bring them in tonight." Olivia blinked. "Chloe too, even if she runs?" Mason answered without hesitation. "She won't get far. We flagged her ID and vehicle." As the weight of everything settled, Olivia's breath wavered. She pressed her hand against her belly, feeling a soft nudge. Mason noticed and crouched beside her chair. "Are you hurting?" he asked. She shook her head. "Just overwhelmed." His eyes softened. "That makes sense. Everything you've endured, it's finally turning." A social worker entered then, carrying documents. "Olivia, once the warrants are executed, the house will temporarily fall under your protective claim," she explained. "You'll be allowed supervised access to retrieve your belongings fully." Olivia listened, stunned. For so long, that house represented fear, control, isolation. Now, it was shifting into something she could reclaim not because she wanted it, but because justice required it. An urgent buzz filled the hallway. Officers rushed toward the monitors. Dawson called out, "We have movement on Chloe." Everyone gathered as a live street camera feed displayed Chloe's car weaving frantically through downtown traffic. She was trying to flee. Within minutes, patrol cars surrounded her vehicle. Chloe screamed at the officers, claiming she was innocent, blaming Brandon for everything. Olivia flinched watching her hysterics, realizing the woman who once tormented her was unraveling completely. But then another alert sounded. Brandon had requested a lawyer and refused to answer questions. Footage showed him pacing inside his holding cell, rage twisting his features. For the first time, Olivia felt no fear when she saw him, only closure. Mason rested a hand lightly on her shoulder. "This is the beginning of your freedom," he said. Olivia swallowed hard. "I never thought I'd live to see this day." Mason's expression held a quiet sincerity. "You chose to tell the truth. That's what started all of this." For a moment, she simply breathed, letting the reality sink in. The law had finally knocked on the right door, and it wasn't hers. Justice was coming for the people who hurt her, and for once, she didn't feel powerless. She felt like someone with a future, and maybe, finally, a choice. That night, after the warrants were issued and the precinct settled into a steady hum, Mason drove Olivia back to the shelter. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets glossy under the streetlights. Olivia leaned her head against the window, exhaustion pooling behind her eyes, but a strange new calm settled in her chest. The day had torn open every wound she'd hidden, yet she had never felt closer to safety. The baby shifted gently, as though sensing the world outside was finally softening. When they arrived, the shelter staff welcomed Olivia inside. Mason walked with her down the quiet hallway, his steady footsteps grounding her. Upon reaching her room, she paused, unable to step in right away. Something about the stillness frightened her. Mason noticed. "It's okay," he said softly. "You're safe here." She nodded, though a flicker of doubt passed through her. Safety was still a foreign concept. Inside, the room smelled faintly of lavender from the diffuser a nurse had placed earlier. Olivia sat on the bed, fingers brushing the blanket, realizing how long it had been since she felt the comfort of a space without fear woven into the walls. Mason remained near the door, giving her space but refusing to disappear completely. "I'll need to speak with you again tomorrow," he said, "but tonight, just rest." Olivia looked up at him, studying the soft concern in his eyes. "Why are you helping me this much?" she asked. He hesitated before answering. "Because you didn't deserve any of what happened. And because some people stay quiet their whole lives. You didn't." His voice carried a sincerity that warmed the cold edges of her heart. Before Mason could leave, another staff member knocked and handed Olivia a small box. "Someone dropped this off for you," she explained. Olivia opened it carefully. Inside lay the knitted baby blanket Mrs. Langley had made, along with a note. "I'm praying for you and your little one. You're stronger than you think." Tears blurred Olivia's vision. Mason smiled gently. "You've touched more people than you realize." Later, after he left, Olivia lay in the dim room, letting silence settle over her. But sleep didn't come. Her mind wandered back to the house, the rooms filled with tension, the stairwell where her life nearly ended, and the office drawers stuffed with secrets she was never meant to see. She wondered if she would ever step into a home without fear again. Just as she began drifting toward rest, a sharp knock startled her upright. A staff member peeked inside. "Olivia, sorry to wake you," she whispered. "Detective Reed is on the phone. He says it's urgent." Olivia's pulse stumbled. She took the call. Mason's voice was low. "I didn't want to alarm you at the precinct, but we got new intel. The man who threatened Chloe has been seen circling nearby neighborhoods. We don't think he's targeting you specifically, but we can't rule out the possibility." Fear seeped into her spine. "Is he coming here?" she whispered. "We don't believe so," Mason replied, "but I'm increasing patrol around the shelter, and I want you to keep your door locked tonight." After the call, Olivia double-checked the lock, pulling the blankets closer. She pressed her palm to her belly, whispering reassurance. For the first time, though afraid, she didn't feel helpless. She had truth on her side now, and people who believed her. As she lay back, thunder rumbled faintly in the distance. Not a threatening storm, just the world reminding her it was still turning. Tonight, she knew one thing with fragile certainty. She wasn't running anymore. She was learning to stay. Morning arrived gently, sunlight slipping through the thin curtains of the shelter room. Olivia opened her eyes slowly, surprised that for the second morning in a row she hadn't woken to shouting, slammed doors, or the quiet dread that had lived in her chest for years. Instead, she heard soft footsteps in the hallway and the distant clatter of breakfast trays. Her arms still ached, but her spirit felt a little less bruised. A knock sounded before a staff member stepped in. "Olivia, Detective Reed arranged for you to visit the community center today," she said. "They have support services and a temporary workspace where you can catch your breath." Olivia nodded, grateful yet nervous. Every new place felt like stepping onto unfamiliar ground. But she also knew she needed to rebuild something, anything before her baby arrived. Mason arrived soon after, carrying 2 warm drinks. "There's someone I want you to meet," he said as they walked to the car. "He runs the financial assistance program, and he's good at helping people start fresh." Olivia hesitated. "I don't want charity." Mason shook his head. "It's not charity, it's support. You've been carrying everything alone for too long." The community center was bright, filled with natural light and calm energy. In the lobby, a tall man with kind eyes greeted them. "Olivia? I'm Ethan Carter," he said, offering a gentle handshake. "Mason's told me a little. We're here to help however we can." His voice was warm, steady, not pitying. Olivia felt herself relax slightly. They sat in a small office, where Ethan reviewed potential programs, housing vouchers, legal aid, and maternal care services. Olivia listened quietly, overwhelmed by the idea that options existed outside survival. Ethan noticed her expression and softened his tone. "You don't have to decide anything today. Just know you're not trapped anymore." As they talked, the baby kicked, drawing a tiny gasp from Olivia. Ethan smiled. "That's a strong kid you've got there." She placed a hand on her belly, feeling a warmth that wasn't fear for once. Mason watched quietly, admiration flickering in his eyes, not for himself, but for her. After the meeting, Ethan walked them to the elevator. "If you ever need to talk, or need anything at all, I'm here," he said. Olivia thanked him, surprised by how comforting sincerity felt after years of manipulation. On the drive back, Mason glanced at her. "You did well today." She smiled faintly. "I didn't do much." "You showed up," he said. "That's more than you think." When they returned to the shelter, Olivia received updates. Brandon and Chloe remained in custody, awaiting formal charges. More victims of the criminal network had come forward. The investigation was expanding. Olivia felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow, not for Brandon, but for the years she'd lost, believing she owed him loyalty. That evening, she walked to the small garden behind the shelter. The air was cool, carrying the scent of damp soil. She sat on a bench, one hand resting on her stomach. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future where she wasn't merely surviving but living. A home filled with warmth, laughter, and safety. A world where her child would never fear the things she had. She didn't hear Mason until he sat beside her. "I thought you might be here," he said softly. She smiled. "It's peaceful." He nodded, watching her with a quiet protectiveness. "You're stronger than you know, Olivia." She looked down at her belly, feeling another soft kick. For the first time, she believed her strength. The next morning began with a tense knock on Olivia's door. A staff worker entered, her expression tight. "Detective Reed needs you downstairs," she said. "It's urgent." Olivia's stomach tightened as she followed her down the hallway, her heart thudding in her ears. When she reached the lobby, Mason stood near the entrance, speaking quickly with Dawson. Both men looked more serious than she had ever seen them. Mason stepped toward her. "We have a problem," he said quietly. "Brandon's lawyer is trying to argue for his release on bail. They're claiming you exaggerated the abuse and that the fall was an accident." Olivia's breath stalled. "But you have the footage," she whispered. "And the files." Mason nodded. "We do. It's strong evidence. But his lawyer is aggressive. They want to claim the videos were manipulated." Olivia's chest tightened. "What happens now?" "We present everything to the judge today," Mason said, "and I need your testimony." Fear pulsed through her, but she nodded. The baby shifted gently, as if sensing her rising anxiety. Dawson added, "There's more. Chloe is trying to negotiate a deal. She wants immunity in exchange for information about Brandon's dealings." Olivia felt a chill. "Will she get it?" Mason shook his head. "Not full immunity, but if she talks, it could strengthen the case." They escorted Olivia to the precinct, where she waited in a quiet interview room. The walls felt too close, memories of Brandon's threats echoing. She closed her eyes, breathing slowly. When Mason entered, carrying a binder of evidence, his presence steadied her. "You're doing the right thing," he said gently. Olivia gave a small nod, though fear still clung to her. Hours passed as detectives and attorneys prepared the case. Olivia finally stepped into a video hearing, her cast visible, her voice trembling but firm. She recounted the day of the fall. The threats. The financial secrets she discovered. Mason played the footage again, Chloe's shove, her scream, Brandon watching coldly. The judge leaned forward, expression hardening. Brandon's lawyer objected repeatedly, but each objection fell flat under the weight of truth. At one point, Olivia felt her vision blur. Stress tightened her abdomen in short, sharp waves. Mason noticed instantly, muting the microphone and kneeling beside her. "Are you contracting?" he whispered. Olivia shook her head, though pain rippled through her again. "Just nerves," she said quietly. His steady gaze reassured her enough to continue. Then came the unexpected turn. Chloe, appearing from a separate room, confessed under oath. She admitted Brandon lied, manipulated her, and dragged her into criminal dealings she never fully understood. She confirmed he staged the camera, malfunctions, threatened Olivia, and stole money from dangerous people. Olivia watched her unravel, not with sympathy but with a solemn recognition of how abuse twists everyone it touches. Chloe wasn't innocent, but she wasn't free either. By the end of the hearing, the judge delivered the decision. Brandon would remain in custody without bail. Chloe would face charges but be held under protective watch. Olivia exhaled shakily, tears slipping down her cheeks. Mason placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You did it," he whispered. "This is a huge win." As they left the precinct, the sky had cleared, sunlight breaking through the clouds for the first time in days. Olivia stepped into the warm afternoon air, feeling something shift deep inside her, not just relief, but renewal. For once, the world didn't feel like it was closing in. It finally felt like it was opening for justice. The days following the hearing were quieter, but Olivia felt the tension of waiting settle inside her like a second heartbeat. Every morning, she awoke wondering whether the peace she felt was real or just the eye of another storm. The shelter staff encouraged her to rest, yet her thoughts wandered constantly to the upcoming formal indictment, hearing one where she would stand face to face with Brandon again. The idea twisted her stomach, but Mason assured her she would not stand alone. On the day of the hearing, Mason arrived early at the shelter, carrying a soft scarf to shield Olivia from the autumn chill. "You ready?" he asked. She hesitated before nodding. Her belly had grown noticeably, and every step reminded her that she was fighting for more than herself now. Mason opened the car door gently, treating her with a quiet respect she was still learning to accept. At the courthouse, reporters gathered like a restless flock, shouting questions the moment they spotted Mason escorting her through the entrance. Olivia kept her head down while cameras flashed, but Mason placed a steady hand on her back, guiding her forward with calm authority. Inside, the waiting area buzzed with attorneys and clerks moving briskly. Ethan appeared from a hallway, offering a reassuring smile. "I'm here to support you," he said. Olivia felt warmth bloom in her chest, another unexpected kindness. When the courtroom doors opened, Olivia inhaled deeply. Mason walked beside her, Dawson following behind. She felt protected, even as nerves tightened her throat. Brandon was already seated with his attorney, wrists cuffed, expression carved from bitterness. He looked thinner, angrier, and entirely devoid of the power he once wielded so effortlessly. For the first time, Olivia saw him not as a looming threat, but as a man who finally faced the consequences of his choices. The judge reviewed the charges: aggravated assault, coercion, financial fraud, obstruction, and endangerment of a pregnant woman. Each accusation echoed like a weight being lifted from Olivia's shoulders. Brandon's attorney attempted to argue diminished responsibility, but the judge cut him off sharply. The evidence, including the camera footage and Chloe's confession, was overwhelming. Then came the moment Olivia feared most. She was called to speak. Her legs trembled as she approached the stand, but Mason's nod anchored her. She told her story quietly, carefully, truthfully. She described the manipulation, the fear, the fall, the threats, and the years she spent shrinking herself to survive. Her voice cracked when she recalled lying at the bottom of the staircase, begging her baby to hold on. But she didn't break. When she finished, the courtroom was silent. Brandon glared at her with a mixture of disbelief and hatred, but something else flickered too: fear. Real fear. He finally understood he had lost control forever. The prosecutor presented the final evidence. The judge leaned back, expression resolute. Given the severity of the charges and the risk to the victim, the court denies any possibility of release. The defendant will remain in custody until trial. Olivia exhaled shakily. A soft sob escaped her before she could stop it. Dawson glanced at Mason, who stepped closer, ready to steady her if she faltered. Outside the courtroom, Ethan approached with open concern. "You were extraordinary," he said. Olivia shook her head lightly. "I was terrified." Mason smiled faintly. "And yet you stood there. That's strength." For the first time, Olivia believed them. The storm was ending, and her new life was finally ready to begin. Weeks passed with a calmness Olivia once believed she would never experience. The trial date for Brandon was set, and though she would have to testify again, she no longer trembled at the thought. Each day brought her closer to the arrival of her baby, and with each sunrise, the shadows Brandon left behind faded a little more. She spent her mornings attending prenatal appointments arranged through the shelter, and her afternoons walking in the nearby garden, letting her lungs relearn what peaceful air felt like. Mason visited often, sometimes with updates on the case, sometimes simply to check on her. Ethan stopped by as well, bringing warm meals and gentle encouragement. Their presence slowly rebuilt the sense of safety her life had lacked for years. She told herself she didn't need anyone, yet she couldn't deny the comfort of knowing people finally stood beside her, not above her. One evening, the shelter director approached Olivia with unexpected news. "A transitional apartment just opened," she said. "It's safe, private, and close to the hospital. If you want it, it's yours." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes. A home, her own space. Somewhere she could bring her baby without fear. She accepted with a trembling smile. Moving day arrived quietly. Mason and Ethan helped load her few belongings into the car. She stood in the doorway of the shelter one last time, hand on her belly, remembering the night she arrived, terrified and broken. Now, she stepped out, with her head held higher. The apartment was small but warm, sunlight spilling over soft beige walls. As Olivia explored, Ethan set up her kitchen essentials, while Mason checked the locks and windows with protective diligence. When they finished, Ethan handed her a tiny potted plant. "For your new beginning," he said. Olivia pressed a hand to her heart, overwhelmed by his kindness. Later that night, after Ethan left, Mason lingered near the doorway. "You're going to be all right here," he said softly. Olivia nodded, meeting his eyes. "Because of you," she whispered. He shook his head. "Because of you. You chose to fight." For a moment, neither moved. Something warm passed between them, gentle, unspoken, real. Days melted into a peaceful routine. Olivia decorated the apartment with soft blankets, small thrifted furniture, and baby clothes folded neatly in drawers. She began envisioning a future filled with laughter and healing instead of fear. Ethan and Mason visited often, and though she didn't know where her heart was meant to land, she finally felt free to choose instead of cling. Then, one crisp morning, her contractions began. Mason rushed her to the hospital while Ethan met them there. Hours later, Olivia gave birth to a healthy baby girl. Tears streamed down her cheeks as the nurse placed the tiny bundle on her chest. "You're safe now," Olivia whispered to her daughter. "We both are." Word of the baby's birth reached the courtroom on the day the final verdict was delivered. Brandon was sentenced to years in prison, his crimes laid bare for all to see. Chloe received a shorter sentence, but was ordered into mandatory rehabilitation and financial restitution. Justice settled over Olivia's life like sunlight warming cold ground. Weeks later, Olivia stood in her apartment, rocking her daughter gently as Mason and Ethan visited. They celebrated quietly, sharing laughter and warmth. Olivia looked around her living room, the soft lamplight, the baby's sleepy sighs, the steady presence of people who genuinely cared. This was a life she once thought impossible. This was healing. This was justice. This was home. So that's how our story closes tonight. But my dear friends, if you are still here with me right now, then something in Olivia's journey must have touched your heart in a way only real life can. Maybe it reminded you of your own quiet battles, the nights you held on even when the world felt too heavy. You see, the Stoics often said, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Olivia's suffering didn't break her, it guided her towards strength she never knew she had. And maybe that's true for you too. Life will test us, people may betray us, but healing begins the moment we choose truth over fear, courage over silence, and hope over the hurt meant to destroy us. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. That power, it's in you right now. If this story moved you, even a little, I hope you'll like this video, share it with someone who needs strength today, and subscribe to our channel so we can keep walking through these emotional journeys together. You're not alone, and your healing, just like Olivia's, can start with a single brave step.